Welcome to our training. Today, we are going to cover a very important topic, which I'll tell you here in a second. But I really appreciate you for being a part of these trainings that we do quite often here at Dynamo Methods. I'm one of the certified coaches and trainers, and I happen to be the founder of Dynamo Methods. But I have other coaches and trainers that help me to deliver these trainings. So, I want to talk about something I see all the time with senior leaders, executives, business owners, and leadership teams. And that's is something I call the executive rescue trap. The executive rescue trap. Now, some of you know that I'm really big on delegation. I'm big on transferring ownership. I'm big on developing, helping people to sharpen their skills and so they can take on more responsibilities and not to overwhelm them, but also to give them a chance to grow so that at any given point, if they ever step away to do something else or go work for another company, they are going to be valuable. Because yes, the more valuable they become, the more they are going to help you as a leader, the more they are going to help your organization. But at the same time, I believe they're not going to work for you forever. So just out of the spirit of wanting to develop other people and fulfilling the purpose that I believe you've been called, being a leader, part of our jobs is to develop other people. So this is when senior leaders keep getting pulled back into problems. They keep on getting pulled back into decisions, conflicts, escalations that should have been handled somewhere in the organization and potentially by a manager underneath them or someone in a different department, but you find yourself being pulled into this. And we call this being pulled into the weeds. And actually, as we are discussing about this particular topic on basically what we are going to call it, I figured it's just the aspect of being pulled back into the weeds, the things that matter, but they can be done by someone else. And not because you are lazy, but because you have higher responsibilities and what we call higher value activities and tasks and projects that you can handle. So, the most frustrating thing is that most executives I know do not want to spend their day in the weeds. They want more strategic time. They want more time to think. They want more time to plan for the present and the future. They want more time to develop people, but they also want more time to focus on the future. But instead, their calendar gets filled with employee issues. It gets filled with customer escalations. It gets filled with manager questions, team conflicts, operational decisions, and problems that should have been solved two levels down or even three levels down. But by the end of the week, they are likely to feel frustrated. I've been there before, not because they are unwilling to help, but because they cannot seem to escape the role of the rescuer. And here's the main idea for our conversation today. Many executives think they have a time management problem, and I get to have these kind of conversations a lot. What they actually have is a leadership system problem. At Dynamo Methods, we focus on two main systems. We focus on business operating systems and we focus on leadership operating systems. And it wasn't until 3.5 or 4 years ago that I figured that leadership can be a system as well. And one of my books that I published last year in 2025 June, as leadership and people as one of the systems every single business needs to have. How great leaders multiply people, purpose, and impact. And it's all about leadership operating system. So most of the senior leaders I get to talk to don't really have a time management problem. They don't have a priorities management problem. What they have is a leadership system problem. So that is what we are going to unpack today. And I want to give you a practical framework that you can use with yourself, your leadership team, or your manager. And the framework is you recognize that you are trapped by the rescue habits. You diagnose to figure out where it's coming from. You find a way to interrupt that pattern, and that might require a little bit of development and training. And then you rebuild so you can have a system that you can use yourself, but also duplicate throughout your organization. So, this framework will help you to break the executive rescue cycle and start moving ownership and decision making back to the right level, back to where it should be done. Now, again, this is not about you acting all like a big shot or being lazy. It's about you recognizing that you have people that are working under you, managers, supervisors, leaders, who have the potential to be developed, or they're already developed, but since they are used to coming to you, they keep on escalating everything to you. So let's start with a situation that probably feels familiar to you. A manager walks into your office or sends you a message that says, "We have a situation." You listen, you ask a few questions, you quickly understand the issue. And because you have experience or you've done this before, you can see the answer faster than they can. That's very natural. You step in, you make the decision, you give direction, you resolve the issue. And in that moment, it feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels helpful. What I hear people say is that I want to get this person back to work. So I'm just going to jump in and save the day. I'm going to jump in and solve the problem. I'm going to tell them what to do because they asked. Over time, something subtle begins to happen within your team. Managers start bringing more issues and decisions to you. One of the things I've written down on my desk is that whenever someone asks me a question, my reflex response should not be, "Hey, let me solve it for them." It needs to be me asking questions, which I'm going to share with you some of the questions that you can ask. So as you're growing, I'm growing as well in that capacity, because if someone asks a question, whether it's about a program that we are developing or a question that a customer has, I've done this for 10 plus years. So most likely I have an answer for that. And I might feel like it's responsible for me to just respond and give them the answer. But again, like I said, it doesn't help them that much. Again, managers will start bringing issues and decisions to you. Employees are likely to start waiting for direction from you. Teams are likely to stop exercising judgment or getting to slow down and ask themselves questions. What's the best way to solve this problem? As teams are likely to stop, again, making decisions on their own, problems are likely to start traveling up instead of being owned where they belong. And in this case, could be one level below you, or two levels, or three levels. And again, you and as an executive, the goal is not for you to step away from everything, but it's to acknowledge that there are people that are capable of taking care of stuff. So you don't have to do that all the time. So before long, you are likely to become the what we call the organization's default decision maker. Helping is not the problem. Leaders should help. We need to help. And there are times that we are required to help. We should support our team members. We should coach our team members. We should remove barriers for them. The problem is when helping turns to rescuing, because helping builds capability. We know that. Rescuing creates dependency. And that's a subject we discussed last week when we did our training on how to either minimize or reduce and to an extent eliminate dependency within your organization. Helping asks question like, "What do you recommend?" Rescuing says, "Here is what we are going to do." You'll be surprised how so many people don't mind being told what to do. But again, that creates dependency and you don't want that. So helping builds capability. Rescuing gets to choke the leadership capacity. And that distinction matters, because the goal of leadership is not to become the answer to every problem. The goal is to develop problem solvers within your team and within your organization. I call this the executive rescue cycle. It usually starts with unclear expectations. That's almost always where it starts. People are not sure what they own, they are not sure what decisions belong to them. Authority is a little bit vague. Responsibilities are either vague or they are blurred in a way. So, what happens? Escalations get to increase. Questions move upward, problems move upwards, decisions move upward, then executives become rescuers. And most executives rescue for good reasons. Like I said, they want to help, they want to protect the customer, they want to support the team, they want to support their managers, they want to keep things moving. But that creates dependency, or at least if there's some level of dependency, it grows. And the team starts learning when things get hard, or when we need to make a tough decision, or when we need to have a tough conversation, then leadership is going to take care of it. And by leadership, I mean you, the senior leader. And when dependency grows, executives get overloaded. That's very predictable, because again, you already have, most likely, I believe, you have a lot of things on your plate, things that you got to take care of. So when you have all these things being thrown at you, you are likely to put your stuff on the side, take care of all these, so to say, emergency stuff, and then you either have to work extra hours, and that's it's not good for you, because you also want to have that work life harmony. The pattern looks like this. We have unclear expectations, which lead to an increase in escalations, which leads to executive rescue, which leads to dependency within the organization, and then there is executive overload. And predictably, you can guess what's going to happen if you get overloaded. The strategic side of the business and the organization is likely to suffer. So here's one of the most important leadership truths in this whole conversation that we are having today. Every repeated rescue teaches the team something. Every time you jump into rescue, every time you jump in to make a decision on their behalf, you are teaching them something. You are teaching them that when in doubt, they need to pass it on to their boss. When in doubt, they need to pass it on to you. They need to wait for approval. They need to bring the problem to the leadership for different reasons. If they have not been taught how to make objective, systemized decisions, then they are likely to hesitate from making decisions because they don't want to mess up. And especially if they have messed up in the past and they either got in trouble for it. Over time, again, people learn that the safest decision is often not making the decision at all. And that is where dependency begins. So, how do we break the executive rescue cycle? The answer is not to become unavailable. Like I said, it is not to stop supporting your managers and your team members. It is not to become harsh or distant or hands off. That would be bad leadership. And you and I agree on that. The answer is to change how you respond when problems move upward, when people come to you, when they open that door, when they call you, when they send that chat message and say, hey, you got 10 minutes, which end up becoming 45 minutes, even sometimes an hour. So this is where the framework, the RDIR, comes in, which is recognize, diagnose, interrupt, and rebuild. So each step is going to help you move from rescue to leadership development. So let's walk through each one of these steps. So step number one is to recognize. You cannot break a pattern if you have not identified it, and to an extent, if you have not named it. Many executives are so used to rescuing that they no longer see it as a pattern. They just do it. They see a customer issue as just a customer issue, a manager question or an employee conflict, a decision that needs approval, a meeting that turns into a problem solving session, a quick call that becomes a 45-minute operational deep dive. Individually, each one of them makes sense, but collectively, they reveal some kind of a pattern. Why are they always coming to you? Now, there might be other executives in your organization that are doing the same thing, but that's still a pattern. How come whenever there's a decision to be made, they'll be like, hey, can you come to a meeting real quick? We just want you to sit in the back and listen in. So the question is, where am I repeatedly solving problems that someone else could be learning to solve? That's a question you and I, we need to ask ourselves. Where am I repeatedly solving problems or handling issues that someone else could be learning to solve? Not just what problems did I solve this week, but what problems did I solve this week that someone else could have solved or should have been learning how to solve. There's a company I applied to work for many years ago, and I didn't get the job, but I learned something from the guy who interviewed me. His name is Pierce, and we never stayed in touch. So we sat down, and somehow we got into a conversation about delegation and about leading other people. I was interviewing for a VP of operations. And one of the things he said is that sometimes they are short-handed in their department. And he said, if I'm going to fill in a position, then I always bring someone with me to cross-train them. And I was like, okay, so if you're short-handed, then why are you pulling someone from a position that's going to make you more short-handed? And he said, I don't want to be the person who fills in the positions because that's going to teach them that I'm always going to be available. So I would rather sacrifice production for a day or two. So I'll be in a position, I'll be cross-training someone because I don't want to be pulled into that position all the time. Now, it didn't make sense for me at that time because I was like, you're already short-handed. Why do you need to pull someone from a different department or a different role to come and help you with this? But looking back, it makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you got to slow down. It's going to cost you extra time, money, and resources, but it's going to benefit you big time. I still struggle with that because there are some things I can knock out very quickly, whether it's working on a landing page or a marketing funnel, but I have people that can do that. Sometimes I just need to ask, and it might pull them away from something else they're working on, but that's going to save me a lot of time. Or if I have something that I'm the only one who knows how to do it, then I'm going to slow down, pull someone from what they're doing, and then we sit down and we spend an hour or two training them. And that has paid off very well. So, how do you know if you are in a cycle? If managers bring you decisions instead of recommendations, that's a sign that you are in an executive rescue cycle. If employees bypass their leaders and they come to you, that's a sign that you are in that cycle. If customer escalations come to you too quickly, and what I mean is a customer calls and before they even resolve the issue, they just got, hey, there's a customer who's really upset. Do you want to take this? I've done that before, and it sounds like you're saving the day, and you might be in that particular context, but you're not helping the team. If the people have been trained well, if they answer that call, it doesn't matter how mad the customer is. You got to ask them some questions. What seems to be the problem? Let me gather as much information as possible, and then you pass them to the manager, and then you brief them on what the issue is so the manager can actually solve the problem. If team conflicts land on your desk before managers have tried to resolve them, that's also a sign that you are in that executive rescue cycle. If your strategic time keeps getting replaced by operational decisions. Now, if it's an emergency, by all means, you can step in and help. But if you find the time that you had set up for your strategic thinking, strategic decision making, or strategic meetings get replaced by operational decisions, then most likely you are in that loop of the executive rescue cycle. If you leave meetings with work that should belong to someone else, again, you go to a meeting and before you know it, actually you're the one kind of leading the project that they were discussing about because everyone else is acting as if they don't know what to do or they're not confident enough to lead the project. And that last one, especially about the meetings, is a big one because again, most of the times when a meeting is called is because we are working on a project or there's a problem that needs to be solved or there's a big initiative that's being announced. Sometimes the clearest sign of executive rescue is a manager bringing you a problem, and by the end of the conversation you leave with the assignment. Let's say they come to your office and they walk you through the issue. You get to discuss with them, you give them some ideas, and then they go, I have no idea how to do this, and it's due on Friday. And you're like, let's just do it together. Basically, you just walk away with the homework. And we call that upward delegation. Now, there's a group of people out there, really smart and sneaky managers who always act as if they don't know what they're supposed to do. And they have mastered the art of upward delegation. That's something you need to be aware of. Now, again, if someone doesn't know what to do, they need to be developed. And it's something that needs to be done as quickly as possible. By all means, you need to jump in and help. Let me give you an example. Imagine a manager comes to you and says, I'm not sure what to do about this employee. They keep missing deadlines. The executive immediately starts asking questions, diagnosing the employee, recommending the conversation, deciding what should happen, and maybe even offering to join the meeting. Now, that may be helpful, but you, if you step back and ask this question, who owns this? Now, the manager came to you and they said they have a problem. It's an employee issue. It all depends on how big the problem is. Since you've done this before, you are likely to walk them through the process. But the question is, who owns this problem of trying to help this particular employee? Is this the executive or is this a manager's development moment? If the executive keeps taking back situations, the manager never builds the muscle, and that's the leadership muscle. The executive may solve the immediate issue, but the organization loses a development opportunity. And basically, you as the leader, you lose that opportunity to develop that manager. And I learned this from someone who is really successful, and actually he is retired now, but he was a very successful director of operations for a major organization here in the US. And he's the one who said that whenever someone shows up to my office all frantic and acting as if it's an emergency, and it could be, my first goal is to slow them down, not to jump in and respond. And he said, whenever someone says, I don't know how to do this, it sends a signal to my brain that person needs to be developed. When someone says, I'm not sure, it sends a signal that person needs to be developed. If they say, I've done this before, but I need your opinion about this, it sends a signal that they need to be developed so they can grow their confidence. He taught me to slow down, and he said it doesn't have to be for hours. He said if you slow down for about 30 seconds, and that means someone walks in and let them vent, and then you go, okay, Do you want to grab a seat? I'm about to go get some water. Do you want some? Like, really, you're trying to delay your response because the reflex response for most of the leaders is to jump in and rescue. So you as an executive solve the problem in the immediate, but the organization again loses that opportunity to develop the person. And that's why recognition matters. That you got to recognize the pattern, you have to name it, you have to be very crystal clear, and probably just watch and see how often it's been happening. If you slow down, you're likely to recognize that pattern. So the first move is not to fix the problem. The first move is to recognize that pattern. Number two in the framework is to diagnose the root cause. Once you recognize the pattern, you have to ask, why is this issue on my desk? Why is this issue showing up on my desk pretty much every single week or every day or every hour, depending on the pattern that you just. This is where leaders have to slow down, because not every escalation has the same root cause. Sometimes they are going to escalate the decisions and the issues because they lack competence. So instead of assuming the manager is lazy, weak, or incapable, you need to diagnose what is missing. Step number three is to interrupt, which is my favorite. This is the most important part of the framework, and it is the most practical part of the framework, something that you can actually do to solve the problem or get out of that executive rescue cycle. This is the moment when a problem lands on your desk and you have a choice. And the keyword is you have a choice. You can rescue or you can develop. And often the difference comes down to the next question that you ask. When a manager brings you a problem, the rescue instinct, like I said, is I know what to do. Let me give them the answer. But the leadership development instinct should be this is a moment to help them grow. So the core question becomes, how do I support this person without taking the decision back? How do I support this person without making them be dependent on me? And this is the key. You are not abandoning them when you slow down and get to ask those questions. You are not being dismissive, and you got to be careful. Sometimes it depends with the tone that you use. And as a leader, I believe you care about the person. And even if they are coming to you 5, 6 times a day, you're not going to get all upset and you lose it and scream at them. I hope not, because again, if they're coming to you 5 times in a day, most likely you have allowed that to happen. So you should take a little bit of responsibility in that sense. Whenever you slow down and ask questions, you're not telling them to figure it out on their own. You are helping them in a way that builds capability instead of dependency. I'm going to give you some questions you can use to interrupt the rescue. Number one, you can ask the question, what do you recommend? Instead of jumping in and telling them what to do, you need to be like, what do you recommend? The next question you can ask is, what options have you considered? What decisions do you feel are yours to make? Or what authority do you feel you have? Another question is, if I were not here, what would you do? Those questions get to change the conversation. They move the manager from reporting the problem to thinking about the problem. Because when you slow people down and ask them, what do you recommend? What do you think is the best decision to make? If I was not here, what would you do? You are getting them to think, and you are teaching them on how to make their own decisions. And before you know it, they will have strong muscles to operate without you being there. So these questions are likely to move you as the executive from an answer giver person to being a coach. And from a foundational level, a coach is someone who helps you find your own solutions or to find solutions to your own challenges and your problems. Again, there are times when executives need to step in. If there's a legal issue, if there's a major financial risk, if there's a serious customer issue, if there's a safety concern or a values violation within the organization, you need to step in. So this framework is not about being passive, it is about being intentional. And the goal is not to avoid every problem brought to your attention. The goal is to stop what you call a necessary escalation from becoming the operating system. In the interrupt step, you are asking this question, is this mine to solve? Is this challenge mine to overcome? Is this decision mine to make? Is this theirs to solve with my support? Is this a coaching moment or is this a leadership development moment? Let's go to the next step, which is to rebuild. And this is the last one in this framework. This is where you move from handling one rescue moment to strengthening the leadership system. And like I said, most of the executives don't have a time management problem. They have a leadership system problem. So you want to move from handling one rescue at a time, one problem at a time, one issue at a time, to either strengthening the leadership system if you have one, or establishing one. Systems help you to be more flexible. I use a calendar. And if someone wants to meet with me, they book a time in the calendar. My assistant has access to my calendar. So some people go through my assistant. My calendar is automated. You click, you book a time, you get a confirmation email. If it's going to be virtual, you get an automated Zoom link, and then you'll get some reminders 24 hours before, 2 hours before, and 30 minutes before the meeting. That's a system. So a system is going to give you freedom, is going to bring flexibility to you, and you're likely to have more time on your hands when you have a system. So if you happen to be one of those people who are resistant and apprehensive about systems, I encourage you to give it a shot, and it's going to be a game changer for you. The reason we are talking about this step, or at least you need to go through this step of rebuilding, if you only interrupt one conversation, then you may stop one rescue, you may solve one problem. But if you rebuild the system, you reduce the need for rescue in the future. And that's the goal. And the goal is not to eliminate everything. There's no you can eliminate every problem and every escalation, but you minimize and you get to reduce that. And the core question here is, what needs to change so this does not keep coming back to me? Senior leaders have to ask system questions, or they should. If the same decisions keep coming back to you, you may need clearer, what you call more clear decision rights. What are they supposed to decide on? Who decides on what? So people don't just wait on each other. A good example would be, let's say you have someone in charge of marketing, you have someone in charge of sales, and then you have someone in charge of service delivery. You find the marketing person puts the messages out there, the leads come in. The leads most likely are going to be captured by a system, or someone is going to fill a form. And there needs to be a clear decision right. Who gets the lead to the salesperson so they can have that sales conversation? Is it the marketing person, or is it the salesperson's responsibility to log into the system or see the leads that we have? Or when a phone call comes in and someone needs something to be done, like in our case, to do training, coaching, and systems, then who is going to make what decision? So those are some of the things you have to define. So let's say the salesperson talks to that particular prospect and they buy a product or service from you. Then who gets to move that customer from being a sale to the service delivery so they can get what they bought, or whether something is going to be shipped? So there needs to be very specific and well-defined decision rights to get all those things done. And you can imagine, if nothing has been defined, then the marketing person is going to assume the salesperson is going to get into the system, get the leads. The salesperson is going to assume whenever there's a lead, the marketing person is going to pass that lead to me. And now there's a wait and see. And that can be very damaging. And you can imagine what's going to happen if that problem persists for so long. Most likely, you're not going to be in business. So you got to have decision rights on who decides, who recommends, who approves what, who executes on what. If managers keep escalating people issues to you, you may need what you call stronger coaching rhythms. Leaders in most of the organizations, they do one-on-ones with their team members, or they just do group meetings, department-wise or team-wise, whichever way you do it. If there are so many people issues being escalated to you in between the meetings that you're having, then you may need to establish stronger coaching rhythms or meeting rhythms. And the question is, are managers being developed? Is there a process and a system on how to develop them so they don't have to be coming to you all the time? Are they practicing having hard conversations, or giving feedback, or even running meetings on their own? If employees keep bypassing their managers, you may need to reinforce the chain of ownership. And the question is, are people clear on where to go first whenever they have an issue? I like to say, if someone has a direct leader and they come to me, I'll be like, hey, thank you for bringing this to me. But they, have you talked to, and I'm referring to their manager. And if they say no, then that's my chance to educate them. And I'll say, by the way, that person is likely to give you the answer to your question faster than I can, because they work with you every single day. They are closer to the issue than I am. You may want to talk to them, or if it's an emergency, I'm going to help you this time, but next time, make sure you talk to them before you come to me. So it's an opportunity for me to educate them, not just to send them back and say, hey, go talk to your manager, then come back to me if they don't solve the problem. That's likely to make them feel like you just dismissed them. Now, if again, they keep on coming back to you, there might be a development problem. And the question is, are your managers actually empowered to lead their people. But also on the flip side, are executives like you unintentionally rewarding bypass behavior by responding too quickly. If leaders keep waiting for permission, you may need to reward initiative. And this can be a big project or a big initiative. It all depends with the size of your company. Some of the companies have a reward program, and at the end of the year they'll say the person who takes the most initiative or the person who exhibited the biggest margin in terms of the growth. My recommendation is reward good behavior. And in this case, if people are taking initiative, make sure you reward that either publicly or privately. And it doesn't have to be that expensive. You can just be like, hey, good job on making this decision. And if you're curious, probably you can ask them, how did you make that decision? Basically, you are developing through rewarding that behavior. And that can be simply by recognizing them. Another question to ask is, do you celebrate responsible risk taking? Now, the keyword is responsible because it can be very costly when you let people make expensive decisions. So most of the organizations and leaders don't even like to talk about that. But life is at risk, and there's got to be a risk to be taken so long as it's responsible. Do you support people when the decision was reasonable, even if the outcome was not perfect? And it will never be perfect. If there are some guardrails that you've put and you've trained your people very well, they make a decision. It may not be the exact decision you should have made, but are you recognizing them for at least trying to make that decision? Because for you to recognize them, obviously you have to look into what they did, and that means you'll be able to identify the gap between what you expected and what they got, and that gap actually is an opportunity for you to develop them. So if not for anything else, just slow down and get to recognize them so you can get a chance to train them and develop them. Senior leaders have the best opportunity to make the biggest impact in an organization simply because they most likely they have managers underneath them, and those managers have employees that they get to lead. So whenever a decision comes to you, or a question comes to you, or an issue comes to you, yes, you might help the manager to solve the issue, or you train them, or you coach them, but you're not doing it just for that one manager. You're doing it for all the people that are underneath that manager and the people that are underneath those people. And that means you as a leader, you got to be ready. You got to be developed first off. You develop yourself, or you get a coach and get developed. But beyond that, you need to be ready, not to rescue, but to develop people. So when you come up with a leadership system, in this case, a system that's going to either break the executive rescue cycle or that's going to minimize the aspect of people escalating stuff to you, basically what you're doing, you are reinforcing the escalation system that you put in place. And if you reinforce that, basically you are increasing ownership. People will be able to take responsibility. And when you reinforce ownership, you get more ownership. So this is where executives have to shift from being what we call heroic problem solvers to being the architect of leadership capacity, from being the rescuers to being the developers, from being the problem solvers to being developers of problem solvers. And that is a different kind of leadership. It may feel slower at first, but it scales with time. It might take 90 days, it might take 6 months for you to get there, because the strongest organizations are not the ones where the executives make every decision. The strongest organizations, I believe, are the ones where more people are capable of making good decisions at the right level. So whether it's going to be a supervisor or a manager or a senior manager or an executive, when you have people throughout the organization who can make the right decisions at the level that they're at, that's when you get to scale and you get to grow. So let me bring this together. The executive rescue trap is real, whether we like it or not. And it often happens to good leaders, capable leaders, responsive leaders who care. But there's a danger hidden inside those strengths, because every rescue you perform trains your team to wait for you. So my challenge for you is that this week, I want you to ask yourself one question. How many problems did I solve this week that someone else could have solved? Do not feel guilty if your list is longer than you would have wanted. And I think you need to ask yourself that question with curiosity, because the answer may reveal more about your leadership system than your calendar ever will. You might think you have a time management problem, or you're just have a lot of things on your desk, but most likely asking that question is going to reveal a leadership system problem. So you can use the framework that I just taught you. you recognize the problem, you diagnose what is missing, you interrupt the rescue in real time, and then you rebuild the system so ownership and self responsibility can grow. The goal is not to stop helping your team, the goal is to stop helping in a way that creates dependency, because organizations do not scale when executives make more decisions. Organizations scale when more people are capable of making those decisions. Until next time, keep leading, keep making an impact, and keep developing yourself.